Right, good morning all, and welcome to the Procurement Scrutiny Inquiry Panel. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and we've had from Councillor Bridget Rowlands. Michelle?
Yes, that's no other apologies.
The second one is disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests for members and officers. No? Okay. Then item 3 is prohibition of whipped routes and declarations of party whips. And then the next item then is the minutes of the previous meeting and responses to the panel's questions. Right, go through the first lot. All right, the minutes for the 20th of October, page 1, page 2. All okay with them?
Councillor Holly, just to say that the transcript from that meeting with the contractors will be on the agenda at your next meeting as part of the findings report, so it'll have the whole transcript there.
Okay, then we've seen the additional information, response to the panel's questions. Do any of you want me to go through all of them? No? Right, okay. The next item then is item 5, which is public questions.
We have no public questions today.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Then we go on to item 6, which is Business Wales, and I have pleasure to introduce, is it Elgin? Right, Elgin, would you like to go through the report that you sent us?
I haven't created a report, but would you like me just to present the Business Wales support, and we can play from there then. So Business Wales, we are contracted by Welsh Government, and we provide business support to both pre-start companies and to post-start trading businesses. The only criteria for the support is that businesses need to be classed as a Welsh micro SME. So as long as they employ under 250 staff or 55 million turnover, they'll be eligible for the support. So we have relationship managers who are experienced business advisors, either ex-accountants or company directors, and they offer general business support from conducting, diagnostics of businesses and creating strategic plans, to offering support on business planning, cash flow, funding, marketing, and so on as well. And we have a team of specialist advisors as well, with their skill set ranging from export, HR, sustainability. We've got a mentoring scheme, and of course we've got the tendering department as well. And that's the team I'm in. So my role as a tendering advisor is to assist these SMEs and micro companies to tender for public sector tenders. I run monthly how to tender webinars. These are all registered. These are published on the Business Wales and also on the Sell to Wales website. So we help businesses to register on the portal to receive tender alerts, making sure they have the right CPV codes and locations to receive relevant opportunities. During this session as well, we talk about the tendering process, how to become tender ready, so what they need to have in place to meet the minimum requirements, from the selection questionnaire, and also how to respond to tenders and using other portals, including the eTender Wales. So that's the the generic how to tender webinars, and I also offer one-to-one support on live tenders. So, for example, if there's a business in Swansea that requires assistance with bidding for a tender with Swansea Council, then I would offer a one-to-one support meeting with that business. We can't write the tender for them, but I would certainly just guide them through the process, help them on what they need to achieve, and help review and tweak draft responses as well. I would also engage with some of my colleagues, particularly in the sustainability team and HR team, if there are any specific questions around that area. For example, creating a carbon emissions plan, for example. We can get support off a colleague that way. And potentially around the pricing costings as well. If they're struggling to work out what their overheads and profits should be, we can put a few support packages in there as well for them. So in addition to the one-to-one support, we offer live tender sessions as well. So I was involved with Swansea Council a few years ago in the procurement teams when they issued a large tender out for the general building materials framework and also the domiciliary care contract as well. So we invited the the businesses together, and then I walked them through the actual tender document and explained what they needed to complete. And just help them through the tender process. We also offer early engagement sessions as well, and meet the buyer events as well. So if there's a large contract, if there's a contract, we can help facilitate meet the buyer events for them to engage with local suppliers in the area for to be involved in that particular project. In addition to the advice, we also have two pledges that we've created with the Welsh Government. One is called the Green Growth Pledge. So this is to offer businesses a range of support to improve their efficiency and to decarbonise. So activities such as reducing vehicle use, improving waste management, water and efficiencies, and using appropriate packaging and so on. And also an equality pledge as well, to help businesses take proactive steps to create a more inclusive and fair and diverse workplace as well. So those are the two pledges that we've created with Welsh Government as well, and we do strongly advise clients to sign up for these pledges as well. But in a nutshell, that's what we kind of provide as part of the Business Wales support. There's no cap on the amount of hours they can receive from us, and the support is fully funded as well, as it's fully funded through Welsh Government. So that, in a nutshell, is the Business Wales support that I offer. There's no regarding the clients as well. They can either be from Swansea, but they don't necessarily have to bid for a contract with Swansea Council. They could tender for a contract in London or up in Edinburgh, as long as we support an actual Welsh SME. That's the main emphasis of the support, really.
Okay. Thank you, Elgin. Has anybody got any questions? Right, Jeff Jones. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, only one. Sorry, Elgin. I must admit, if I was a business starting out, I think it's music, to my ears with the assistance you actually give businesses. You seem to cover a lot and so on. But when you actually started, you actually mentioned a 55 million turnover. Sorry, I don't know if I missed something. Is it up to anything over 55 million?
So the contract that we have with Business Wales, with Welsh Government to provide the service, only Welsh SMEs are able to access the support. And the definition of an SME would be businesses employing up to 250 staff or up to 55 million turnover. If they're above that threshold, then unfortunately, they would be unable to take advantage of our support. However, we can still support them with facilitating meet the buyer events, but we won't be able to offer one-to-one support on bidding for tenders and contracts then.
No, I think that's quite understandable. I thought it was over 55 million.
All right, so sorry, apologies for that. No, it's in the 55.
Quite a large business, you know, for shall we say, somebody new into the market and so on. Just wondering really what sort of assistance is offered to them. So, you know, you've answered the question. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question to Jeff there, but the other point I was going to make is how do you get your clients? Do they simply get in touch with you, or are you proactive in going out looking for them? And could I also say, I think, gosh, you do provide a good service. Looking at all the things that you cover, I think is excellent.
That's right. It is frustrating at times because the support is fully funded. It's free for businesses, but unfortunately they appreciate free support with you know, they feel they'll be getting better value for money if they pay for an external consultant, you know, to come in rather than accessing the you know, the free support. But, you know, personally, I have a good relationship with a lot of the procurement officers, particularly in Swansea Council, and on tender documentations and on the Sell to Wales notices, there'll often be, you know, a note there to say, you know, to receive free support, you know, please contact Business Wales, you know, for the tender. We've also got an active marketing team as well, who you know, who go up there and you know, try and, you know, sell our services. So and then we do try and be out there as well and try and liaise with our you know, particularly the tier 1 contractors as well and suppliers, just to try and help them signpost, you know, clients and subcontractors to you know, to our way as well. And then we have a number of the business advisors and the relationship managers, especially. They work alongside a lot of our stakeholders, so development bank, all the you know, the accountancy, the legal firms as well, just so you know, they can signpost clients towards ourselves.
Okay, Councillor Peter Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I was very interested. First of all, Elton, thank you for that presentation. Very informative. Obviously, you're aware that Swansea Council has a net zero emissions target by 2030, and here we are, of course, in the second week of COP26. And I was very interested, therefore, you referred to advice on decarbonisation by particular applicants. I wonder if you could tell us what are the kinds of concerns and problems that businesses approaching you might face, and what sort of information, guidance and response are you able to give to them? Thank you.
Yes, so we have 2 specialist sustainability advisors, and we're in the process of recruiting a 3rd advisor currently. So these advisors would either support with, to start off with, ensuring that they have an environmental policy, ensuring that they potentially look at adopting the Business Wales' Green Growth Pledge. So selecting a couple of the pledges and creating an action plan and some targets to achieve those goals. Potentially looking at adopting an EMS, an environmental management system. So this could be either the Green Dragon, the BSH 555 or the ISO 14001, and also potentially offering one-to-one support on creating you know, a carbon emissions you know, strategy and plan as well. So, you know, it'll depend on the hunger of the client, you know, how much appetite is there. They might already have some kind of a system at the moment, but they're looking to improve that. So so, you know, there's a range of support the sustainability advisors can provide.
So is your general experience that the clients who approach you on this issue, they're very positive and responsive and happy to take on board the guidance that you give?
That's correct. That's right. Obviously there's a lot of pressure from the client side. So what the public sector organisations are requesting in tenders. So there is a pull, behind that. But of course, I think from the supplier or the business side, there is a drive anyway. Just not just because of of COP, but there is an internal drive just to support the planet, for future generations as well. So it works two ways really.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Councillor Philip Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, my first question is the same as Jeff. I sort of misunderstood the 55 million bit as well, right. And I thought, what are you doing here? The other thing is, I'm sorry that you weren't around in the 70s when I had my business. I think I would have appreciated the help at the time. But do you know, on the top of your head, I know this question could be hard, do you know how many companies you've helped in Swansea alone? Because I go through the directory, I can
not on the top of my head. I would need to look through the the statistics behind that. But that's something I can find out for you, Philip.
The only one I can find just zipping through is Abertawe Travel. But I suppose there's a lot more. I'm still in the A's.
Right. Well, I can have a look on the BAS system, the business account system that we have, to see how many Swansea businesses are registered with Business Wales. I can then try and work out how many clients that firstly I've supported, because not every business in Swansea would require tendering support. For example, local news agents wouldn't need to tender for anything, but particularly they might have had support from Business Wales on recruiting staff as an example. So I can try and find that out for you. But then on Sell to Wales, you can find out on that site how many actual businesses are registered on that site. So just as an example, I believe there are roughly about 7,500 to 8,000 businesses in Swansea at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah.
But then regarding Sell to Wales, there are 753 businesses registered in the SA1 area, and only only 87 businesses in the SA2 region, in the postcode regions. So just as a percentage, then there are businesses out there either who are not registered on Sell to Wales, or potentially businesses who have lapsed, Sell to Wales profiles, because they need to reactivate their profiles every 12 months.
Yeah. And a follow-up to that, Chairman, is new businesses starting up. How do they find out about Business Wales for help?
So it's down to our stakeholders as well. So a lot of the banks would signpost support to Business Wales. A lot of the Companies House, for example, they would signpost as well businesses to ourselves. And just the local accountants as well in the area. But a lot of people, they don't know about the support. We try and promote and advertise our services as much as possible. But it's just down to relationships with key stakeholders and having a good social media presence and attending events as well. Just to try and obtain as many clients as possible then.
Yeah, thank you again.
Okay. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Elgin touched on part where I was going to ask for an annual registration, but do businesses get sent reminders then within that 12 months?
That's right, from Sell to Wales. So there's a lot of confusion particularly in procurement when you're talking about the different systems and portals, because Business Wales is of course the Business Wales the support service that we provide. Sell to Wales is where businesses would need to register in order to receive the actual tender document, tender alert. And then you've got e-Tender Wales as well, the portal used by Swansea Council and many other buyers as well to update and create these, the actual tender responses. But then a lot of businesses, they think that the three mechanisms are all linked to one. So they think, oh, I'm already registered with Sell to Wales, but then they forget that, they've lapsed, with Sell to Wales or Business Wales. So they get very confused between the, the three platforms in a way.
Okay, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Elgin. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Chris Williams. Lyndon, you still got your hand up. Chris?
Thanks. I was just touching on some of Elgin's points. In terms of finding clients, obviously we refer people to Elgin, to Business Wales. When companies express any doubts or interest in learning more about certain aspects of tendering, we can signpost them to the support that Elgin outlined. It's important sort of referral mechanism that we're involved with. It's seen, as Elgin said, in all our literature. I think we previously touched on in a meeting the supplier guide that we put together, and in there it clearly says, contact details for Elgin's team. So we're constantly reinforcing that relationship, that collaboration. And I recall as well, Elgin, Business Wales, you offer funding to companies, don't you? Also to small and micro SMEs, is that correct?
Well, we were contracted by Welsh Government to assist with, a couple of the funds, specific to COVID. But apart from the emergency, the COVID loans, those were the only ones that we administered.
The only point I was going to make was that's another reason that companies, it's a very visible service to companies, because there's these periodic offers of funding and so forth. And I know in terms of marketing, you advertised on, well, aside from the main platforms, all the Welsh Government links and so forth, bus advertising I've seen for Business Wales. There's a high degree of visibility. As what the Welsh Government has tried to do is provide this kind of one-stop shop, these portals for the whole of Wales. So people know where to come. Once they found it once, they know to go back and keep up that sort of consistency of response. So that's important to note. And the other point, if I may, on Elgin's, the up to 250 staff, the up to 55 million turnover, clearly that's a big chunk of companies which are eligible. Just to make that point, that would cover a huge swathe of companies in Wales. So there's a high degree of, potential access to this support, which is very good to note. I just thought I'd make those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Mary Sherwood.
I think what if I might be so bold, I think what most of us here are interested in is whether the council's procurement processes are supporting local businesses to access council contracts. So I'd be interested to hear from Elgin what his perspective on that is. He's already said a little bit about some of the stumbling blocks and some of the problems. But really, we're here to recommend improvements, aren't we? We're here to really dig into what we could do differently in Swansea Council to support local businesses through our procurement processes. So I'd really like to welcome Elgin's thoughts on that. Also, social value aspects like a green growth pledge. Clearly, we've heard that that's important to Business Wales. But is it important to Swansea Council? So I'd like to ask Chris whether tenders are scored in such a way that recognises those additional social value aspects. So if someone's been through the Business Wales process and has made a green growth pledge, is that reflected in the scoring that they get through our processes? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Elgin?
Right, okay, yeah, just to touch on, Chris's point regarding the number of businesses. I believe the last figures in Wales, it was nearly 99% of Welsh businesses are classed as SME. And personally, I'm not sure how many, non-SME companies would be based in Swansea. But I'd imagine it's under maybe 20 as a number. Regarding potential improvement from a procurement perspective, because the way I operate, I not only help businesses tender for contracts with Swansea Council, they might be bidding for a contract with other local authorities, and Swansea do tend to be a bit more SME friendly compared to other local authority without naming them. But regarding potential ways to improve, it's for yourselves potentially as councillors as well to really appreciate how difficult it is to tender. How many of you have actually created a Sell to Wales profile? How many of you have selected the CPV codes, accessed a tender on eTender Wales, read through all the tender pack, gone through all the selection questions, invested in obtaining all the minimum requirement of cyber essentials, the safety scheme and procurement, environmental standards, quality standards, responding to the quality responses, and finally creating the pricing document. The average strike rate in tenders tends to be 20%, so 1 in 5. So if you've invested that maybe a 3-week period in bidding for a contract, no guarantee of success, it is heartbreaking for these businesses who miss out. And then it is a confidence knock as well. So if they miss out on a tender, particularly with Swansea Council, they might think twice before re-tendering, the next time that opportunity comes live in maybe 2 or 3 years' time. So what I would say is potentially a bit more emphasis on early engagement. So a lot of businesses are not sure whether or not a tender is worth them bidding for. So we have done it in the past, a lot of early engagement sessions. So taking time, speaking with local businesses, making them aware of these opportunities, and listening to them whether or not getting them involved as well, making sure that a tender is suitable for them before a tender is live. Potentially clarity on which external frameworks utilise. So will you be utilising, the MPS frameworks, Crown Commercial Services, SUSGAP, or will you be conducting your own procurement? Keep a tracker potentially on how many suppliers express an interest on Sell to Wales, how many then go on to eTender Wales, and how many submit a tender, and how many of these contracts are secured by Swansea-based SMEs. Creating more of a transparent framework regarding renewal pipelines. So it is quite difficult to navigate Sell to Wales to see all the contract award notices. So potentially on the doing business with Swansea Council, having a list of live frameworks with renewal dates with the names of the contractors on each site as well. When it comes to major frameworks, so particularly having a projects page for that procurement. So if it's a £5 million plus procurement, having designated accounts for that. And not only publishing who the tier 1 provider is, but also highlighting who the tier 2s and tier 3 providers are. So the smaller supply chain then can contact the tier 2 providers to become part of those contracts as well. Potentially creating a new role as a supplier champion. Caerphilly Council and Transport for Wales appointed a supplier champion. So their role was specifically to go out in the region and to link suppliers to particular projects and help them becoming an approved supplier in those areas. A couple of local authorities as well are offering grants for consultancy. So a grant to obtain an ISO 9000 standard or an environmental management standard as well. Just to support with the cost, because to obtain an ISO standard, you're looking around £3,000–4,000 pounds, as an annually for that. So those, just a couple of, and ideas on, how to improve, but as a comparison, Swansea Council as a whole, your tenders, they are, relatively SME friendly compared to neighbouring local authorities.
Okay. Any other members? Jeff, you put your hand back up.
Yeah, sorry to come back with this. Just a couple of points. The first one, you don't seem to have mentioned the CBI actually in this, which is the, shall we say, the union for businesses. I wonder what sort of interface you got with them. And really, and perhaps not, you actually give advice out. We've got people, shall we say, that supply services or agreements actually with us. You've got the third sector. You've got not-for-profit companies and, of course, for-profit companies and so on. How do you tailor the advice you actually give those different types of suppliers?
Right. So personally, for myself, I support all types of businesses from all sectors as well. So it is difficult to manage at times, the different sectors. So one minute I might be supporting a construction company, next minute a social care company, and so on. But then in different sectors, if it's in the private sector or a third sector, it doesn't really matter on the tendering front, because it's the same tender process that they'll have to go through. So on the tendering front, it doesn't vary too much. But then on the general business support, we have a couple of relationship managers who are specialists in the third sector. So if a third sector company would register with the Business Wales support, one of the account managers would ensure that there's a relationship manager with third sector experience being allocated to that that company. Regarding unions, personally, I don't get involved too much with those, but then I believe some of my colleagues, particularly the relationship managers, would be involved.
Yeah, perhaps threw the word in union, but on a lighter basis, really, with the Confederation of British Industry, which is
right, okay.
representative. So, I use that word union as the perhaps sometimes spokesperson, shall we say.
So, for example, the Federations of Master Builders, I have a good relationship with one of their officers. So, if I've been asked to run a specific, meet the buyer event or a live tender for a particular tender, I would ask my colleagues, my contacts at Federation of Master Builders to to share, the event with their clients as well. So sector-wise, Federation of Master Builders, the Federation of the FMB as well. There's a social care federation as well. So we do have relationships with different ones as well, and we try to engage with them when we can as well.
Okay, Chris Williams.
I was just going to add to Elgin's response in respect to Councillor Jones. The Business Wales is funded by the Welsh Government, and at the Welsh Government level, from what I understand, there's a kind of a platform to work with the private sector. So the CBI, Federation of Small Business, they will all sit on that. That input would shape the programme of activity, of which Business Wales is the kind of output of that. Then they design it collaboratively to best meet the needs of business. So I just thought I'd mention that as part of that structure.
Yeah, thanks.
Jeff, you still got your hand up? Is there anyone else now who would like to ask Elgin any questions? No. Elgin, obviously, you've given us a couple of examples of what is required. But one of the complaints that I've had from local businesses that it's very costly and a great deal of paperwork to go through it. Could you come forward with any ideas on how to make it easier for them?
So regarding the paperwork, Welsh Government have a set document that we need to complete upon registration. So, for example, list of the demographics. We need to about the business. We need to create a report as well on every client that we interact with. All documents now are able to be signed electronically. So we have a DocuSign system in place rather than the old printed documents. And once they've gone through the full registration once, then that's all we need. There's just one small document, a BW4, then that we just request clients to sign upon every interaction they receive with us.
I wonder if you could send us an example electronically of what small firms have to put in to help with their procurement, because I can remember a firm that made railings, steel railings, complaining and to get a contract with the council you had to jump through hoops and what have you. This is a few years ago. I don't know if they're still in business, but if you could send us a copy electronically of what people require to register, then that would help, I think, and help members understand what the process is for smaller companies to come to actually get in and register to be able to then compete for tenders within the sectors.
Right, there isn't one standard selection or PQQ question there. But I can certainly have a look at one of the live tenders with Swansea, and then we can send one of those across to you. But then the questions to register with the Business Wales, with the account officers, they would be responsible in completing the registration packs. The client wouldn't need to write anything. It's just a telephone appointment to start off with to register with the Business Wales support, and then we would just issue that to be signed, and that's all the client would require from ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Algan. And if once we've received that, if there's any further information, we can email you with and ask for that clarification. If there's no other members wish to question, or Chris, if you want to say any more, on behalf of all of the members and Swansea City Council, can I thank you, Elgin, for coming on here this morning and giving us a brief insight into what Business Wales does to help the local businesses and businesses throughout Wales with their procurement exercises. Thank you very much indeed. You're more than welcome to stay, but I'm sure you're going to make yourself a cup of tea or something, and but thank you very much again.
No problem. No, diolch yn fawr, and thank you.
Okay, members. I think that was quite interesting, actually. In a number of ways. I think the first one, it does seem as if there is an element of complication, which I think small companies might feel very concerned about getting involved in. So when we see the documentation and we talk to Chris and then have that discussion about how locally as a council we can help our small businesses to actually get into this in a position where they may be able to compete and compete for tenders within not just Swansea but outside of Swansea. Okay, the next item is the performance data and comparison data stakeholder survey results. Now then, we go to the first one. I won't go through them all unless members want to go through them all.
Do you want
Hello?
Sorry, Councillor Holly. I think Chris Williams put those forward, so he'll probably want to go through the report.
Right. Okay, Chris, if you want to go through them.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to say, I prepared an overview report as well. So let me just, hopefully you'll see that on your screen. Can you see that, Councillor Holly?
Yes, yeah.
Great. There we are. So in the pack, in the attachments, I provided some data from a number of sources. Firstly, data from the Welsh Government's online system, and Elgin mentioned their Sell to Wales, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with now. So that's the portal which all companies in Wales can access and find all public sector opportunities. So the advantage of that is they don't have to hunt around lots of different local authority websites. They can go to one place, as they can with Business Wales, and get the information that they want. On that, and linked to some of the previous conversation, my past history before the council is I was involved in tendering, I was involved in registering on these websites. I have been through these systems. So whilst it does take a certain amount of effort to get yourself registered, you need to log on to the website, you need to fill in all the forms, you need to put your address in, your phone number, your email. Once you are logged on, they're very useful. So for example, you can set them up to they give you automatic alerts to types of tenders that you're interested in. But we'll come back to that. And I just think, I have experience of the Welsh system, the UK system, and many private sector ones. Big companies use these formats as well. And the Welsh system is very kind of coherent in its sense, is that once you've taken the time to understand it, you're kind of halfway there. That doesn't, detract from the fact there is that competitive element. That doesn't detract from the fact there is this quality element that we want. But it's a very much established system in Wales and provides that clarity. So there's data from the Welsh Government system. I'll come back to data from Meet the Buyer events. We've discussed those. There's also data from contract management and reporting data. So once a contract is live, each council service takes on the operational management of that contract. So I know that Nigel Williams attended an earlier event from Corporate Building Services. If there was an electrical works contract, his team would take on the operational management of that and manage it to achieve the desired outcome. And then we have other general data, which I'm going to share with you also to provide some further context. And as I presented in my earlier paper, we also track, Elgin mentioned DocuSign, which is an electronic tender signing service. Allows us to pass back and forth large packets of information in a legally compliant way and avoid printing stuff. And that saved us last year 24,000 pages of printed waste in terms of, but I mentioned that in previous meetings. There are other sort of tracking systems. So looking at here, so yeah, Sell to Wales as argument part of the suite. He mentioned also eTender Wales, which is allied to that. I suppose the point I'd emphasise here is the Welsh Government pays for these systems. They pay to centralise this service. We receive them for free, and it allows that sort of coherence for smaller companies, and provides that, as I said, that sort of transparency and consistency in how we work across Wales. So yeah, I'll go then first of all to some stuff we get from Sell to Wales, if I may. So there's quite a lot of attachments in here, and obviously what I've provided is just a summary. This is a very light summary. I could have provided encyclopedias worth of data for you, but it's to give you a feel for what goes on in the background. So what we're seeing here, and this comes off this IT system. Again, let me kind of blow this up a little bit. You're seeing this is a contract for demolition and works to chimneys. Clearly everything's got references associated with it. And then we can start to see, I'm going to scroll down a bit, you see the value of this, £550,000. It says here the number of invited suppliers, but that actually means the number of suppliers that registered on Sell to Wales. So they would have been on the system, they'd have seen the alert, and then they'd have clicked something to say, I want to get access to this paperwork. 2 of those suppliers of the 6 then decided not to respond. So that's the category. So I've obviously anonymized all this data. I've taken out the supplier names, which I think is in line with what we should do in these circumstances. But we would know them, of course, through the system. And then we get the we get the reasons why did the suppliers not bid. So one is here saying, well, they didn't really have the time to respond. We give 30 days response time typically. We can give more depending on the complexity. And they can ask us, actually, they can ask us to extend, and we can take that on board, and we do that periodically. And here we've got, you know, in this case, a very large company is saying, well, actually, this is for a smaller company. So this is a big company turning down the chance to bid because it's more suited to a smaller company. So we get that that data from that. So there are a number of these in the pack. Let's have a look at another one. This is the joy of moving between all these screens now. So here we're now looking at rewiring contract. This one valued at 230,000. We had 8 companies which registered. I don't think anybody then, you know, didn't bid. So, you know, going back to the point, 8 companies were interested, but only one of them, you know, would have been successful. And you know, again, to talk about my background, whilst companies can be disappointed, this is the nature of the world, isn't it? You know, the flip side to it is what we just give contracts to companies. You know, and that can breed all sorts of poor behavior, to be honest. You know, I'm sure you're aware of the possibilities and the very high of fraud that can exist with procurement. You have to have an open and transparent process. This is what the bedrock of this thing is. So I just want to, you know, give that spectrum. There's a spectrum between competition, which is how we're structured, or the other end of that scale is you've got to be careful, as I said, you are not giving contracts to certain favoured companies, and just to have that sort of take on that dynamic. Okay, so I won't refer back, I won't put that report back to your screen, but in the next section 3 talks about meet the buyer events. And then I've selected a meet the buyer event I wanted to highlight with you. So again, let me get something up on my screen. Apologies for all this screen jumping, but I just can't think of a better way of doing this. So here, this related to the supply and installation of play equipment and safety surfacing. So this was a large, actually, capital program project that's been undertaken, it's still ongoing actually, in the last 12 to 18 months to refurbish, to renew, to upgrade parks equipment across the city and county of Swansea. Meet the buyer event, because we hadn't done this in a few years and wanted to understand the level of innovation and new products and services and get to know the supplier base. This would have been led by the Parks Department, and my team would support in the structuring of that. So this is a real company's feedback. You know, this was obviously held online during the pandemic. It's sort of probably similar form to the way we're working now. So this particular company found it useful, and I put all the companies that responded in the folder, so you can have a look through those and see how they, you know, viewed the program. I'm just going to show you one document, if I may, more linked to this because it's quite a useful one. I won't go through them all one by one, but so this is the overview of the program. And what you can see is I know it's obvious, but I just wanted to point it out anyway. You've got the meet the buyer event before we go out to market. That's the point of these things. They are to inform the specification. They're to inform what we do. They're to engage with the marketplace. Given Elgin's point, they are also a referral point, if need be, to say to people, look, this is how we're going to work. If you want support, there's this service available. So it was just to place it in that context. And you know, the link between the previous set of documents and these set of documents is that we are listening to companies, we are getting feedback, we are looking to fine tune what we do. So, you know, one of the things that came up, not this year, but in previous years, companies were somewhat well, I'm going to give two examples, if I may, to jump around. Firstly, the point I think I should make is, if we've got somebody going into with a drill into a school to drill holes, you know, that's a very different proposition than if you have somebody coming into your house to do a quick bit of putting something on a wall. If they work in a school environment, we have to make sure the contractor is insured. We have to make sure they're a qualified electrical contractor. We have to make sure also, we do something called method statement questions, that when they come in, we know what job they're going to do. We don't find the wires hanging down the wall. So these kind of extra questions we ask suppliers, they're there for a reason. They're there, in that case, to protect children, fundamentally. So whilst there's always this trade-off, and suppliers can sometimes badge it as bureaucracy, I'm sure you'd want us to use someone, for example, who's a qualified electrician or a qualified gas engineer, and we'd also know what work we're doing. So this is part of the, and I know, as I said, from being on the supplier side, sometimes those questions make you uncomfortable. Do you have the right experience? Do you really have the right certifications and knowledge? But then linking it to that, one of the bits of feedback we did get previously was we also always ask for, or as a general rule, twice turnover to the value of the job. So it's the size of the company. What we don't particularly want is a company that's done £30,000 worth of business and then it's bidding for a £10 million contract. You know, would it have the capacity? Would it be able to take on such a big piece of work? Has it got the staff? So with that said, there are some grey areas in that, as you can imagine, companies that might be slightly too big, slightly too small for the right thing. So we allowed companies, in order to, you know, listening to supplier responses, to submit further evidence. We've said, well, if you haven't got the 2-to-1 ratio of turnover to contract value, you can submit further evidence. And that has worked on a number of occasions where we might have asked for a bond or some other form of guarantee. That helps those smaller companies on the margin. But still, we've got certain standards, is what I'm trying to articulate. You know, we deal with very important, you know, and sometimes life-risking decisions, you know, through this, you know, as I said, we get an electrical job wrong in a school, it's not going to go down well. So we have to take certain precautions. And that's part of, you know, the process here and why the paperwork is robust. That's what I call it, robust. And obviously, if people want to challenge us and take anything out, we're more than open to it. But we haven't had that sort of feedback. I just want to, you know, articulate that to you anyway. Right, I'll keep going. So I gave you the overview of the place of the Meet the Buyer events. Within the pack, you've got actual company responses to the Meet the Buyer events, and you'll have seen, the data we get per Sell to Wales tender on why people didn't bid and so forth. I wanted to you know, under that Meet the Buyer event, it was something that Amanda Carr said in the last meeting, and you haven't actually signed off the transcript. I noticed Michelle mentioned it in the early part of this meeting of the session where we had suppliers, if we can call them that, came in. But Amanda did say that she would praise the local authority for the work in the last two years and our growing emphasis on cooperation around specifications for services. So what I'm trying to say there's these formal routes of getting feedback, or these per contract routes, if we call them that, of getting feedback. But there is this more general work that goes on with the council. And you're probably aware the council hosts many events involving the private sector, involving the third sector. There are many standing groups. I know there's a developers forum. There's all sorts of things that goes on. I don't sit on those, but this interface is live across the organization. So we're trying to always be attuned to what the wider economy, what our stakeholders want. So I just wanted to mention that. And I thought that comment by Amanda was important that I highlight that, if I may. Right, contract management. So again, in terms of data, so clearly we've gone through the procurement process, the contract is now live, and what I've put into the pack then, and this is in, let me have a look, Appendix C of the documentation set, and perhaps I'll pick again one sample from that. Sorry to jump around, but so let me go Appendix C. Which one should I? There's 4 documents in there. but I'm going to pick the one related to this, which I think is a civil engineering brief. So in the contracts, there are clearly defined milestones, performance outcomes that we want in order to meet the goal. And then what you've got in here is, this is showing how those are managed with the contractor. So such documentation would be reviewed throughout the life of the contract. There would be regular reporting sessions for the employer, that's us in a sense, the Swansea Council is the employer and the contractor, to keep that criteria, keep that rather dialogue open to make sure the contract delivers on time to the right outcomes. So the departments are keeping this information, sharing it with the contractors, giving them feedback regularly throughout. And you can see the range of variables that are going on here throughout the process. So I put that one in there. Then the social services contracts adopt a slightly different format because they're not construction contracts. Obviously, they're dealing with the people and service. There's a Schedule 4, which is the performance monitoring schedule in the pack as well. I also put in there, I asked a few people to give me some written expressions of how they manage contracts. So you've got one in there for a telecoms contract. You've got one in there for housing support, which through the pandemic has obviously been critical as you look, to make sure no one is suffering, and the housing solutions are the best possible. So there's been a lot of emphasis on that through the pandemic. But the point is, I put all that data in there for you to review. And again, these are just sample data. So there's probably about 15, 20 documents in it as a very light sample of what's available in terms of performance data. But the point is, we're getting it. We're watching it. We're seeing it. We're hearing it. We have a formal complaints procedure. I should mention that as well. And hopefully you'll be happy to hear we have had 0 formal complaints.
That's good.
In any of the recent years. Nothing. And I think it is good. And I think Elgin's point that he saw us as better than some of the surrounding authorities, I think is an important one. I think we are really good. I genuinely do. Now, that does not mean we've got nothing to learn. I'm not saying that, but we are trying our best. I think that's the point. We are listening. We are looking to adapt. I mentioned that turnover one as an example. Those accreditations I mentioned, do you need to be a qualified electrician? We need to, we do review those. But of course, some of them are non-negotiable. If you've got electrical work, we need a qualified electrician. It's as simple as that. And, somebody who's not a qualified electrician might think they can do the work, but there are other bigger considerations, particularly safety, that we have to take into account in the bigger picture. Okay, so the last section of the report, well, let me go back to the main report. Sorry to, again, jump around. Yes, I've talked about in this Annex C, that was the stuff I referred to then, the performance management that's going on within the contract. Other relevant data. So I provided in the Annex D Celta Wales data showing the contracts that are advertised, so you can see what we've published. And I know I reported that to Council probably in the last 12 months. There was a Council question on that, maybe a bit longer ago. But we get that tracking data as well to see what's going on. We provide certain. In 5.2, I'm talking about like a Gantt chart, basic time planning tool to help departments factor in all the steps. Because as you're probably aware, public money, there's a lot of due diligence required. But there's also other things we'd like to do, which is around co-production. So that's particularly where you're involving external stakeholders and asking for their opinions on how we should shape things. So our advice to the departments is build in the time for that. And that Gantt chart is an A to Z of not only what council procedures they need to follow. So, for example, they might need to get my team sign off. Well, they would for procurement. They need my team sign off. If it's a capital program, they need to make sure they've got the capital budget approval signed off from the accountants. You can imagine there's all these sort of internal checks and balances, but it also takes into account things like co-production, so the improvement of the specification. So there's guidance on that front. So, and going back, I'm just reading through my final paragraphs. Yeah, I mentioned the other type of reporting we get, that the page is saved through the DocuSign e-tender solution. Yeah, I talk about I mean, one of the things that comes up, of course, is linked to that 2-to-1 ratio, the size of contracts. But I think I've covered that. We will accept further information, but we need to keep good standards, I think, is the trade-off in this. But we do, and I think I did discuss this in a previous meeting, didn't I? And I remember Councillor Jones raised it about the lotting of contracts, where we look to split the very large, packets of work into smaller pieces, which are more attractive to smaller companies. So we do endeavour to do that where possible. I'm sorry, just go back to the document. The Welsh, I mean, we've talked about some of the other stuff going on at the Welsh government level. Obviously, Elgin's service was part of that. There is, this debate around centres of excellence going on in the Welsh government, social value driving that through contracts. So there's a huge range of policy initiatives which are being built up at that level. I sent the link to the policy consultation. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but I definitely sent that through from one of the previous requests of the panel. This is a green paper issued by the UK government. It's worth a read so you can understand the direction of travel and what's being considered. The thing to note on the changes to the procurement regulations are that they are likely to take place probably in about 2 years' time, I think. We have not yet seen the actual new rules. We haven't even got to that stage yet. They're just asking for people's opinion on how they should evolve procurement, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out. But clearly, they're talking about net zero. Some of the agenda items, the carbon neutrality. Although, and I think I mentioned before, if you look at the electric vehicles tender, if you look at the More Homes initiative and the energy efficient housing that's been created for the council, if you look at solar panels on schools, these are outcomes which are being pursued now. I don't think procurement regulations as such require us to change. That's a decision we build into, for example, to the specification. And, again, I think the council is considered one that's pushing the boundaries on this. And there's a climate change group, for example, that sits in the council. So my team support 40 different groups in the council. So there's one that relates to climate change. There's another which is related to the city region. And I think that's important because, the economic developments going on there collaboratively across multiple partners to take into account different stakeholder views. And you'll be aware of that from other fora. But it's important to note that there's a lot of interaction. We don't just sit on our own, isolated in a pillar. But typically in my area, at least, we're a support service for others. So, to give an example of that, if the highways department is going out for, home to school transport, we'd be assisting them with that and providing that procurement expertise while they sort of formulate the specification and so forth. So I'm on the last paragraph, but yeah, the point I was going to make was there is a huge swathe of change about to come. And I think that green paper, which I mentioned previously, is part of that. And yeah, and I think, and to mention Councillor Hopkins, he's been a very strong advocate of a swathe of the issues that this panel has touched on. The local supplier agenda, the green agenda, and is supporting us in meeting those. Those discussions are regular as to how we keep improving and how we allocate more time and effort to this, in amongst. But obviously, the pandemic, not to overplay that, but it has resulted in a huge hit to the way in which we work and but it's been very successful, you know, in the sense that the PPE requirements across the council have taken priority these last in the previous period, but they were very successfully managed. And again, you know, that you've probably heard that when the Ministry of Defence visited, Swansea was an example of best practice. And oh, sorry, the other thing I should mention, talking about examples of best practice, but linked more probably to this agenda, when we were looking at local supplier development, we were part of a pilot study funded by the Welsh Government. A ministerial group looked at what was going on in each of the local authorities. That's only the local authorities that applied to be part of this pilot, so it wasn't everybody, but there was a good 10, 12 authorities, and we were recognised as a potential future home for being a Welsh centre of best practice. So recognising the good efforts we put in to this area. So I think that's just useful to note when they looked externally at us. So, thank you. Hopefully that's enough, but please let me know if you want me to go back to other parts of the report.
I've got three members who wish to ask questions, starting with Councillor Mary Sherwood.
Thank you, Chris. What I'd like to ask again about this thing about local companies and whether the added social value that they bring is protected or supported through our procurement processes. So, suppose we have, say, a historical, perhaps ongoing repeat contract with a local supplier, a trusted local supplier who pays the living wage to people who live locally and who includes community development and volunteering for added social value. And they've provided services that we've been happy with for many years. But then at the next tendering opportunity, they're undercut, if you like, by a company from England proposing to use sessional workers paid a lower rate, so offering a much cheaper contract overall. I mean, would you agree that actually the local company with the higher levels of social value for us as Swansea Council should have some advantage in our procurement processes? And do you feel that that already happens effectively or not?
I can completely understand what you're saying in the way that was described. I suppose I'd have to look. I mean, what we can do is keep looking at how we change the design of contracts. No doubt about it. If there's something we haven't asked, if there's something we haven't considered, we can certainly look at that and learn from it. And that's what we try and do generally. In this instance, I mean, obviously without knowing the exact case, but we would have put out a specification and we have said, you must bid against this, and we'll have taken into account the supplier's responses to that and awarded accordingly. But I think, taking a step back from this particular contract, if there are examples like that, I think it would be useful if those are articulated to us, to me, if that's okay, and then I can look at them individually. And I have to say, it's been very, very useful dealing directly with councillors across the whole of Swansea Council for bringing up issues periodically, providing that intelligence, providing that knowledge of what things are out there. I mean, I'm working with Councillor Hopkins, working with Councillor Stewart at the moment on a number of projects. So they bring these issues to me to have a look at. So I guess my quick answer is I welcome that intelligence, and we certainly look to learn if things are not met expectation. It's not all I can say is it's not our objective to not value that wider social value that you mentioned. We probably have 1,000 contracts that are live at any one time. The pace of work is very busy. As it should be. We're not sitting around doing anything. But yeah, so that sort of input to where we can change and improve is more than welcome, as I'll say, if that's okay. And I'm happy to pick up afterward the specific detail behind that query to see where we can improve.
Okay. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it is important, as you say, about having sort of a feedback for monitoring. It is important that we got that in place, and obviously two-way partnership. So we've got transparency regarding with the procurement and the contracts. Because obviously, you flagged up about, some of the areas whether you would look at to say about what we would expect to information to come off contractors regarding make sure that contract could be actually done. Like, for example, they might have more than one job going on, and the concern with with actually the staff be moved about.
Yeah.
Under the key performance indicators, have we had to intervene with any contractors in regards to the level C or D, which is poor, or if you look at page 74, give you an example.
Right, let's have a look.
If you look at you got C and D, and what the
so this, sorry, just to correct, that's not in my report. This is in one of the annexes, is it?
Yeah.
In annexes C and D.
Yeah. If you see page 74.
Which attachment are we looking at? Apologies.
I think it's where they've done the showing of the key performance indicators.
So was it the one I put on this? Let's have a look. Is it this?
Yeah. It's color coded, isn't it?
What's it in relation to, Mike?
It's just I wanted to know, Chair, if it's relation to the actual they got different categories, good or or acceptable, and it follows on from Tracy Tillman's information.
Is this about what is acceptable and not acceptable within the contract?
Yeah.
I think the answer is, I'm sure there have been robust dialogues with suppliers periodically. Obviously through the design of the contract, we are putting in place something we think is fair to both sides. But I think if this is related to the parks program, which I think it is, you're saying, I think it probably best I get you that specific information and answer that. Because as I said, once it turns into a contract management activity, that is not me, that's not my team. So I can let that team provide a written response, if that's okay, or come back to a future meeting, however you prefer. But I would say in general terms, looking across all contracts, I think that's the point of this, that we can have that open dialogue, that we can raise issues, and vice versa, they can raise issues with us. So I'm certain things will have been flagged through the processes. Am I aware of these processes being badly going wrong? No. I think that's the point here. You put these contract management ways of working in place to get early intelligence, to find out problems up front where they occur. And I know with certain projects it could be something that's nothing to do with either party, some other construction hazard has been found or whatever, and you need to work around it. But yeah, if it's okay, I mean that we can come back to you on that one with more information, more specific information, if that helps. Is that okay?
Yeah. Fine, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Phil Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know Chris Williams picked on us poor electricians, so I'll stick with us. If, for example, another contractor, they just said 230,000 for rewiring houses, we do our due diligence on the main contractor, but has he then got to inform us if he subs any of that work out, and what any checks done on the subcontractors, because all this work is carried out in people's houses?
Yes. The quick answer is yes. They would need to tell us of subcontractors and assure us of the right standards are in place. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think as you're saying, it's right and proper that we do that. But then, certain companies might say, well, you're asking us for too much information and so forth, and this is always the tension in the system. But something like that, as you rightly say, is critical. You know, electrical works are we want to make sure they're done properly, of course.
Yeah, because many years ago there was nothing like this in place.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is a way forward, because I won't give you any stories, because I was subcontracting to works with council at one time. Yeah, and there are certain people that were on site that I wouldn't let into my house. But as long as you do the checks.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. That's all. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chris. You know, I've learned a lot this morning. I'm glad that, you know, we've got assistance from you know, the Welsh Government to actually aid people. And I think, you know, procurement has come a long way. I know that everybody procured at one time and so on, and I think it's been a bit of a fight to get it, you know, under one control. And I'm glad, you know, procurement really is to ensure that, you know, it's open and transparent, as you've actually said, to safeguard against fraud and also favouritism, you know, at the end of the day. I know Chris actually brought up about the, you know, terms and conditions, you know, for any contract and so on. They do seem to be getting longer and longer, and I can understand that some suppliers would be, you know, scared off actually for it. But at the end of the day, we're actually looking at, you know, the best value for money, or best value for the people of Swansea. You know, with any tender, one of the most important parts of the tender is the actual specification. I must admit, you know, many years ago, we used to find problems really with, shall we say, variations to contract, where something would turn up and, you know, the value of the contract, shall we say, would be extended or added. What sort of involvement have you actually got with regards to when the specification is drawn up?
We sign off the paperwork as part of a group of people, which would include, to be honest, more for the technical specification, it would be the relevant head of service. So if it was an IT contract, the head of IT signs it off and so forth. You know, they are the technical experts in it. I'm looking at the overall, as you said, the transparency, the fairness, does it make sense what we're asking for? Is it coherent in terms of the information packs? And then you mentioned the contract variations. Now, I personally sign those off as well. There's a sort of dual reason for it. One is to avoid you know, distortions to the original contract, but I'm also effectively keeping a track. You know, if I see a certain department that might be using that route, you know, it would be a lesson learned, wouldn't it? Why are your specifications needing to be amended? But to be fair, that luckily doesn't seem to be the case, but I do maintain that check as to what is going on. Sometimes, you know, there are legitimate reasons. There could be a delay for one reason or another, but that is a contract amendment. It's a change from the contract amendment. So there could be something that's been found in the works that requires a bit of something extra, some extra emergency construction work. So that's what we're dealing with. But going to your point, I do maintain an overview of that for those exact reasons. And I think it's always I think it's important that, as you're saying, I think that we do maintain that what we go out with, we are enforcing through the process was actually what we required, and we're all trying to learn from that again and spot any gaps simply that may exist.
Thanks. Okay. Jeff, Phil, you still both got your hands up? Okay, if that's all, Chris, can I ask? You know, we have a register of companies that we call off to do with work, you know, to do highways work or other work. That list of companies have all been risk assessed, and you know we've done due diligence on them, on most of them anyway. Some of them unfortunately go bust when we're halfway through a contract or something. But when we produce this register of companies that we can call off, how often do we update that register? Excuse me.
Yeah. So, in a sense, we don't have one single register of companies.
I understand.
So yeah, so we have companies per contract, or particularly per framework contract. So if we looked at the home to school transport stuff, just to jump around a bit, on that list there are probably 30 local companies registered who could provide home to school transport. They can actually, new companies can join that at any time in that structure of contract, because it's quite a dynamic marketplace. People drop in, drop out, and particularly it goes back to that capacity issue. If one of those smaller companies wins a contract elsewhere, they may well drop away from serving us for a while because they found something else to do. So some contracts, because of their design, there's a constant renovation of suppliers, and that's one example. The highways type contract, which I think you mentioned, they typically last for up to 5 years. So there would be probably on that list 6 suppliers, well, let's say between 4 and 6, who have got through all the due diligence, who have shown that they're capable of this work. And then those 6 companies, for example, would compete against each other for certain packets of work. But the point is, when is that opened up to new companies to compete? About every 3 to 5 years is the headline answer there. We found that is a kind of, some stuff. I mean, and jumping back to the previous meeting, we were talking about one of the companies asked, didn't they, about this, why are we going out direct to the market sometimes? Why do we use frameworks another time? If you remember the gentleman who was with the computer company. Now, in that case, there was a Pan Wales framework was set up. Again, probably on a similar 3 to 5 year basis. But what we were finding was we weren't getting, we didn't feel we were getting the most competitive pricing, because in that scenario of what was a fairly, one could call commodity product, we could perhaps go out to a wider market. We did do that, and we saved a significant amount of money by doing it that way, by opening out the field. So I know that's probably from starting off where you have one list of suppliers. I suppose what I'm trying to show is it's actually broken down by specific requirement, and even within that we have multiple ways of doing it, but typically it is a 3 to 5 year regime where we will have intensively gone through that due diligence process you mentioned, and then we will stick with those companies and then refresh it after the end of that period. Hopefully that gives you the background.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? No? Okay, well, thanks very much, Chris. We then got on agenda item 8, research in social and local procurement. Michelle, this is the work that you've been done. Do you want to go through it?
Yeah, just to outline, I won't go through the whole thing in detail or anything, but just to outline, this is 5 examples of practice elsewhere. 2 of them are recommended by the panel, Preston and Cardiff. One of them's a local Welsh example. One's a very small pilot study, and one is using, the Leeds one is about an anchor organisation. They're all different, but their common purpose is improving local procurement. They're only examples for you to get an idea of a wider context. So that's really all I say. I assume you've gone through the report. It's just a case of, are there any issues that you'd like to raise from that, or any ideas that you may have, and obviously taking into context that these are only examples, and there is a vast array of different examples across the country.
Okay, Councillor Mary Sherwood, I know this is something you're particularly keen on. Would you like to say anything or ask? No?
No, I think I've made my views clear and I've asked my questions. And
okay, Chris.
If I may just briefly comment on it, having a scan of it. So the Preston model is something that's very familiar to us. We've actually worked with their allied partner, I think it's called the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, CLES. No, I think the point I would highlight in that model is they talk about combined spend in their area of £750 million, of which when they started their process, only 25 million was remaining in the local area. So from 750 million, only 25 million. In Swansea Council, where we spend some 260 million pounds a year, we are looking at 100 million pounds staying in our area. So they spent much more and they had much less staying in the area. So for them, this was a very big journey that they went on. The point, I suppose the point I'm making is we've been looking at this for a long time. It has been a consideration for a long time, for many, many, many years. And I just wanted to mention that their journey is significantly longer. And I think we do, a good job. I really do, of considering the local economy in the wider context of what the council needs. I mean, that doesn't mean we can't learn. As I said, I keep repeating that. And as Councillor Sherwood said earlier, there are going to be examples where we can improve what we do. But as a general high-level kind of comment on that component of the report, there's stuff in there from Cardiff Council. I mean, I had a look at that. All of that stuff that is mentioned, we do. I think that's the only point I would state. It talks about the ethical suppliers charter. Swansea is a signatory to that. It has been translated into our procurement. We do sit on a joint committee led by, I believe it still is Councillor Lloyd and the trade unions to look at these aspects that integrate safeguarding of the contractors, that provides escalation paths in the event of modern slavery, for example. So Swansea Council is a signatory to that. I think there are sort of 3 or 4 elements in there. It talks about the Open Doors Charter, I think, in Cardiff for SMEs. That's exactly, in fact, what we've been talking about, although I haven't referred to it that way. It talks about that openness, that transparency, that using Sell to Wales. That's what we do. We look at the size of contracts I mentioned for SMEs. Where there are subcontracting opportunities for the larger contracts, they are also advertised on Sell to Wales. I forgot to mention that. So we put that obligation on any lead contractor that they must advertise it on Sell to Wales to keep that transparency, that consistency, and provide that openness. The specifications, that we discussed, electric vehicles, solar panels. This is your, part of getting that social value as well. It's not to be forgotten that it's integrated into what we want from the tenders, aside from the huge amount of good work that the social care area does. That's sometimes forgotten as that sort of social value in this debate. There's a climate change group I mentioned also. We do work with the third sector, as Amanda articulated. There's a lot of good work that's gone on that front. We work with community transport providers, providing home to care facility type work, and that's through a third sector provider called Dancer. I'm just trying to give you a flavour. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I did read the reports. We're fully aware of them. And I think we do offer best practice in this as a general overview. There's always going to be things we can tweak and improve on, but in terms of the essence of what's being conveyed, I just wanted to let you know that we are, aware of that best practice. Perhaps what we don't do is sell our own best practice well enough, but that's a contrast between busy and just doing the job, and maybe that's something to consider. But we do listen to others, I think is the point. I'm engaged across the UK. I mentioned the WLJ works, the regional works, so we're always open to hear from others as well, and certainly not keep a closed mind. And I think I mentioned previously, I lead the regional group, which covers South West Wales plus Mid Wales plus actually Bridgend have joined. So they're looking to us for leadership often in these in the development of this type of thing, and we do have a strong and clear voice on that as to what best practice might be. There we are. That was my comment, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chris. The only thing I would say is, having read through the document, it takes me back to the time we actually introduced Beyond Bricks and Mortar, which was a step forward in our, if you like, ethical charter to try and employ more and train more people locally. And that was back in the early 2000s that was introduced. And it's nice to see that in many ways, a lot of that, especially the Cardiff social responsibility, is actually following what we've been doing.
Yes.
So I'm quite pleased with that. I think we can take it, if we can take it to the next level, and especially with our contracts for food, etc., and make them more local. And that is the thing I think that everybody would like to see. And but I'm sure with the context with this scrutiny report, I think we can build on that. But I think the research that Michelle has done has been well worth it, and I thank you very much for it.
Yeah.
Any other comments? No? Okay, that being the case, we then have item 9. And again, thank you, Chris, for your input. It's been more than welcome and very informative. Item 9 is the inquiry projection project plan. Item 9, we've done session 6, and then we've got the concluding inquiry findings report and discussion on the 24th of November, then the 31st of January, the draft report, and then the 15th of February, where we report the panel and the programme committee on the 15th, and then cabinet on the 21st. Is everybody happy with that? Okay.
Yeah.
That being the case, can I thank you all for attending? Michelle, can you stay on for a minute, please? Can I thank you all for attending? And again, thank the officers, Chris and everyone else has been involved. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
That was good, Michelle. Fair play.